Moral issues and narratives. Hi class. This presentation is about moral issues and narratives primarily, but I wanted to get started with something I should mention from Chapter 1. Since this might be your first course in philosophy, it's worth mentioning that there are four main branches. Metaphysics studies the nature of reality. Logic studies language and argumentation. Epistemology studies knowledge. Ethics studies right and wrong action. I talked about some of these in my introduction. Next, I want to talk about a kind of narrative from Chapter 1, didactic stories, stories that are told to teach a moral lesson. These have applications in various professions. Didactic stories allow professionals to conceptualize outcomes before decisions are made. For example, the trolley problem. A train is running out of control down a track. In its path are 5 people who have been tied to the track by a mad philosopher. Fortunately, you are several miles away in a control room and can flip a switch, which will lead the train down a different track to safety. Unfortunately, there is a single person tied to that track. Should you flip the switch? We also use stories to make a point. For example, here's a clip to one of the movies mentioned in the chapter. The movie is entitled Smoke Signals. The movie is based on the book The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven by Sherman Alexie, one of my favorite native authors. In this clip, Victor tells Thomas how to be a real Indian. You should watch this clip. Next, I'll talk about traditional stories. Here are some examples. Myths, traditional, often historical stories, explaining natural or social phenomena, for example, Greek mythology. Fairy tales, typically stories for children involving imaginary beings, for example, Cinderella. Parables, simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson, for example, the Good Samaritan. Fables, short stories aimed at children with animals as characters, ants and grasshopper. Next, I want to talk about 2 philosophers' views on the role of narratives. First, Plato. Plato was an ancient Greek philosopher. He was a student of Socrates and the teacher of Aristotle. His views were, on reason versus emotion, reason is primary. The rational man is always calm under pressure and in the face of crises. So, drama, movies, literature, plays, etc., is not concerned with the rational man, but the emotional man. This is the subject of art. Consequently, art appeals to something lower, the emotions, than reason in us, the soul. Consequently, artists persuade our emotions. This persuasion can be good or bad, so we have to monitor the dramatic representations that we tell our children and allow ourselves to listen to. Aristotle's views, on the other hand, are more inclusive. Tragedy lets us work out our emotions. We learn about life from fiction. Here's a quotation from page 101 in your textbook. Tragedy is the imitation of an action that is serious and also as having magnitude complete in itself. In language with pleasurable accessories, each kind brought in separately in the parts of the work, in a dramatic, not in a narrative form, with incidents arousing pity and fear, wherewith to accomplish its catharsis of emotions. Usually in a tragedy, a regular guy falls into some bad fortune because of something he does, some choice he makes. Fear and pity have to be evoked because these are the emotions that we work out by watching dramas.